Struggle as I may, the Naruto community is still filled with a ton of people who believe in incredibly common misconceptions. See, with a story as long as Naruto's, and a community as vast and active as Naruto's, there are bound to not only be common misconceptions, but also a lot of people who buy into these misconceptions. Either because it's been a long time since they read the manga or watched the anime, because these misconceptions fit the worldview of Naruto that they want, or simply because they're trying to trick other people into believing something that they actively know is not true. When it comes down to it, a very large portion of the Naruto community does not understand the story as well as they possibly could. And this isn't the end of the world, but it can be a bit aggravating when you see people disseminating an idea that you know is objectively false. And therefore today, I want to go over some of the biggest misconceptions that the Naruto community has for this IP. And with this video, hopefully I'll be able to redirect some of the people that believe in these misconceptions back to the reality of what's actually happening in Naruto. Because I'm gonna be real, a couple of these misconceptions are kind of fun. And some of them are even backed up with what's referred to as evidence. But at the end of the day, believing in a lot of these misconceptions can completely change how you interact with Naruto as a story. And therefore, in order to ensure that everybody is getting the story from Naruto that they should, righting these wrongs is an important mission. And therefore, with no further ado, let's get directly into the biggest myths in Naruto debunked. But before we get to debunking anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, you can find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the one-on-one fights, and Ino and Sakura are slugging it out, if you could call it that. So before we dive in this video, I want to lay down a couple of rules. See, I'm not going to be talking about opinions that I may or may not disagree with. Something like, oh, Naruto's not actually a story about hard work overcoming talent, because as the show progressed, those narratives actually flip. Well, yes, if you ask me, if somebody does believe that Naruto at its core by the end of the story is still about hard work overcoming talent, I would say, no, you're wrong, and therefore that's a misconception. Fundamentally, that's just my opinion versus somebody else's. There's evidence and arguments on both sides of the equation here. Then that extends all the way out to somebody saying something along the lines of like, oh, Sakura is useful as a myth. Because, well, once again, if you asked me as to whether or not Sakura is useful, I would say yes, and I have evidence to back up that claim. But there's other people out there who would say that Sakura is useless, and they think they have evidence to back up that claim. And thus, when it boils down to it, that is, once again, a battle of opinions. Now, it's a battle of a correct opinion versus a non-correct opinion, but still. Today, we are just going to be talking about things that a lot of people in the Naruto fandom are objectively wrong about. No opinions, just cold, hard facts. And we're going to be going from the least disseminated talking point all the way up to the most. So starting at number 8 on the list of Naruto myths that are still talked about in 2025, we have the idea that Sasuke trained for a whole month before his battle against Gaara. See, for those of you who don't remember, after the ending of the preliminary rounds of the Chunin exams and the one-on-one battles, it featured fights like Neji versus Hinata, Naruto versus Kiba, and Rock Lee versus Gaara. The Chunin exams were essentially postponed for a month, with everyone essentially told to cool their heels or possibly train to get ready for the final round of 1v1s. And thus people like Naruto, Neji, and Sasuke all spent large chunks of this month preparing for their final battles. However, the reason I say large chunks and not the entirety is because while people like Neji and Naruto were able to start training basically from the jump, Sasuke wasn't. See, it's a common misconception that Sasuke and Kakashi had a month together. For Sasuke to learn Rock Lee's weightless taijutsu, learn lightning release, and master an A-ranked jutsu in the Chidori. And while accomplishing all of that would have been impressive in just a month's time, in actuality, after having his curse mark sealed away by Kakashi, Sasuke actually spends 2 weeks in the hospital. Yes, while watching Gaara versus Sasuke in the finals, both Rock Lee and my guy revel at the fact that Sasuke was able to learn Rock Lee's taijutsu in just a month's time. However, we see in chapter 93 that Sasuke doesn't actually join Kakashi to train in the canyon where Kakashi is doing some one-armed rock climbing until 15 days have passed since the beginning of training, implying that Sasuke spent 15 days in the hospital before he started training, which means in actuality, Sasuke mastered Rock Lee's taijutsu, learned lightning release, and mastered the Chidori in just 2 weeks' time, making what he was able to accomplish before his battle against Gaara all the more impressive, and making the idea of him abandoning the leap because he didn't believe he could get stronger there all the more ridiculous. That's what he accomplished in 2 weeks of training. If he had just spent a couple of months or a couple of years continually training, he probably could have got stronger than he did under the tutelage of Orochimaru, but whatever. Anyways, it's kind of devastating that this misconception is probably the least talked about on this list, because unfortunately, writing this misconception does put more respect on Sasuke's name. So I don't know, maybe skip this one. Up next, at number 7 on the list of the biggest Naruto myths, we have Rock Lee doesn't have chakra. Now, fortunately, this is one of those myths that's begun to fade away over the years, because people like myself have been screaming about how Rock Lee does very much have chakra for years. See, it's a common misconception that Rock Lee, like Asta in the Black Clover universe, simply doesn't have access to the power system of the universe. However, that's not the case. Rock Lee does have chakra. Everybody in the Naruto universe, ninja or not, has chakra. Chakra is a fundamental part of life in the Naruto world. The body has chakra circulatory systems. There is 10 Ketsu points, and if somebody runs out of chakra, they die. And while people didn't start having chakra in the way that they currently have chakra until Kaguya came down to the planet, chakra has now become an essential part of human life in the Naruto world. And Rock Lee is not an exception to that rule. However, Rock Lee does not have the ability to mold chakra. See, in order for Rock Lee to use something like ninjutsu or genjutsu, he would have to be able to mold his chakra into something else. Whether that be a fireball, lightning around his hand, or a genjutsu projection that makes you believe that you're being stabbed for 72 hours straight, any kind of ninjutsu or genjutsu involves turning your chakra into something else. However, taijutsu does not. Taijutsu is built on the principle of funneling your chakra somewhere else. Want to jump high? Funnel chakra into your legs. Want to punch hard? Funnel chakra into your fist. Taijutsu is about chakra flow, not about molding chakra itself. And we know that Rock Lee is able to control the flow of chakra in his body because he can do things like run on walls and walk on water. Two things that require the flowing of chakra to the bottom of your feet. And therefore, while Rock Lee doesn't have the ability to mold chakra, he has the ability to flow his chakra across his body, allowing for him to access chakra boosted strength. See, because in the Naruto universe, there is a difference between physical strength and chakra assisted strength. Choji is physically the strongest out of every member of the Konoha 12. If it came down to an arm wrestling match where the usage of chakra was not allowed, Choji would win, probably out of everybody in Konoha. However, if we're allowing for chakra to be used to boost the strength of the people in this arm wrestling match, then Sakura or Naruto would probably win. But Rock Lee would also do quite well because he's able to use his chakra to assist his strength and speed. But since we're talking about chakra and Kaguya and chakra being a life force, coming up at number 6 on our list of widely believed Naruto myths, we have the idea that chakra did not exist on the Naruto planet before Kaguya descended down. And honestly, this is one of the myths on this list that I can understand how people would believe this. See, Kaguya is talked about as the progenitor of chakra on Earth, the mother of chakra, if you shall. And it's because Kaguya, after marrying a human, gave birth to 2 half-human, half-Otsutsuki children, Hagoromo and Hamura, who are the first beings on Earth born with chakra. And therefore, this does make it seem as though chakra didn't exist on Earth before Kaguya came down to it. After all, Kaguya, Hagoromo, and Hamura were the only 3 people with access to chakra. However, that's not necessarily the case. See, we know from Kaguya's telling of her descent down to Earth that before Kaguya even came to Earth, there was already a chakra tree present, and that chakra tree had already created a chakra fruit. And it was a well-known fact that anybody who went close to said chakra tree die. And this is because even though Kaguya was the mother of modern day chakra, both humans and Naruto's planet had some kind of other life force that existed prior to the introduction of chakra as we know it. Now, for the planet, this is probably nature energy. And honestly, it's probably still nature energy for the humans that existed before Kaguya's time. Because if humans and the Earth didn't have any kind of energy source, the chakra tree that existed before Kaguya would have nothing to absorb. And if it had nothing to absorb, it wouldn't have made a chakra fruit that Kaguya was able to consume. Into the fact that Kaguya enacts infinite Tsukiyomi and pulls in tens of thousands of humans into the root of the chakra tree, then very clearly she had to be absorbing some kind of life force energy from all of these humans that later turned into her White Zetsu army. Well, so while maybe the Earth didn't necessarily have chakra as we knew it before Kaguya, whether it was nature energy, physical energy, or spiritual energy, humanity had access to some kind of life force energy before Kaguya's introduction. But speaking of scary people with white hair, coming up at number 5 on the list list of myths that people still believe in the Naruto community, we have that Sakamoto Hatsuki and Fugaku Uchiha had run-on-site orders. See, the concept of run-on-site orders is one of the most talked about talking points in the entirety of the Naruto fandom. However, it is also one of the least understood talking points in the Naruto fandom. The concept of run-on-site orders was introduced with Minato, who was established after his feats in the Second Great and Third Great Shinobi World Wars to have run-on-site orders. That is to say that if a ninja from an enemy village like the Hidden Stone, the Hidden Cloud, the Hidden Sand, the Hidden Mist saw Minato on the battlefield, they were to immediately run away. This is because Minato in his prime was considered such a deadly force that there was literally no hope of victory if you entered into combat against him. And thus, if you saw his cloak, his golden hair, or maybe even just one of his kunai, it was best to turn your tail and run before he killed you. Now, people were so fixated on this idea that ninja from 4 other villages simply ran at the sight of Minato that they scrambled to try and find other people in Konoha's history that also had run-on-site orders. However, unfortunately, Minato was the only person in the entire history of Naruto to ever truly have run-on-site orders. And yet 2 other people have their names thrown into the ring rather frequently. Those 2 other, at least most commonly people, being Sakamoto Hatsuki and Fugaku Uchiha. And for very different reasons. See, people believe that Sakamoto Hatsuki, the White Fang of the Leaf, had a run-on-site order because of what happened to Kakashi in the Third Great Shinobi World War. See, because when Team Minato was sent out on a mission to blow up a bridge, cut off a supply line for the Hidden Stone in the Third Great Shinobi World War, when Hidden Stone shinobi saw Kakashi from a distance, a chill ran down their spine as they thought for a second that that might be the White Fang of the Leaf, Sakamoto Hatsuki. And they talked about how if it was Sakamoto Hatsuki, they would have to retreat from this battle indefinitely. Now, this paired with some of the feats that we know about Sakamoto Hatsuki, like the fact that he was talked about to be stronger than all 3 legendary Sannin in their 20s, and that he had battled against people like Gran Chio and Hanzo the Salamander and survived, made a lot of people believe that this legendary ninja, Kakashi's father, also had a run-on-site order. But that's never explicitly stated. Now, yes, some people probably would run from combat if they saw Sakamoto Hatsuki on the battlefield, but he never had official notices put out by villages saying, if you see the White Fang of the Leaf, run away. And this is probably why Sakamoto Hatsuki was able to be responsible for a couple of very important deaths, like the fact that he was the person who killed Sasori's parents. Now, as for Fugaku Uchiha, people also believe that he had a run-on-site order because he had the nickname Wicked-Eyed Fugaku. He was in contention for becoming the 4th Hokage, even though Minato won the job, and it was stated in Naruto by, I believe, Kakashi, that in a one-on-one fight with a Sharingan user, you should always retreat. And it's not until you have 2 people trying to fight against one Sharingan user that you should engage in that battle. Now, because of this, in a sense, every single Sharingan user does have kind of a weaker version of a run-on-site order. In 1v1 situations against a Sharingan user, you should run. Not until you can jump no jutsu a Sharingan user should you engage in that battle. And therefore, in a sense, Fugaku, who was maybe an MS wielder, did have a kind of run-on-site order, but like with Sakamoto Hatsuki, it was never made official. And therefore, if anybody ever says that anybody outside of Minato had a run-on-site order, they're objectively wrong. But since we're talking about Fugaku Uchiha, we might as well talk about his favorite son, because coming up at number 4 in the list of myths that Naruto fans still believe in 2025, we have Itachi murdered all the women and children of the Uchiha clan. Now, once again, this is one of those myths that I can understand how people believe it. Obito's involvement in the Uchiha massacre is massively downplayed in the anime. In fact, pretty much any and all details about the Uchiha massacre are pretty massively downplayed in both the manga and the anime, which is why the Uchiha massacre was re-explored in Itachi's light novels, with the second one of Itachi's light novel being almost entirely dedicated to that fateful night. And it's in that light novel that we learn that Itachi had a lot less to do with the Uchiha massacre than some people give him credit for. See, because, well, yes, even the most casual Naruto fan kind of remembers that Obito was there on the night of the Uchiha massacre. Only those who have read the light novel or listened to me for long enough know that Obito and Itachi kind of split up the Uchiha clan 50-50, with Itachi taking on and slaughtering all of the fighting men and women of the Uchiha clan, which is why he was responsible for killing his mother and his father, who were both Jonin, while Obito, on the other hand, was responsible for killing all of the non-combatants in the Uchiha clan, like the non-fighting men and women and the children. Now, obviously, this was done in a ploy to make Itachi look a little bit better after the Uchiha clan massacre than he did previously, because while even Obito was vindicated in the end of Naruto, he is objectively a worse guy than Itachi. And therefore, Kishimoto and the author of Itachi's 2 light novels wanted to shovel the darkest bits of the Uchiha massacre onto the real villain in that duo, Obito. However, a lot of people believe that Itachi was out there killing kids because because, like I said, the anime and manga's telling of that night is not all that detailed, and because there's been a couple of rather interesting fan arts of Itachi pulling children out of closets as they tried to hide from it. But anyway, speaking of people wrongly getting credit for killing more people than they actually did, coming up at number 3 on the list of myths that the Naruto community still believes in 2025, we have Minato killed 1,000 shinobi. Now listen, over Minato's lengthy war career in both the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars, did Minato kill 1,000 shinobi total? Probably. However, Minato never killed 1,000 shinobi in a long, arduous battle that led to the defeat of the Hidden Stone. See, this one's kind of tricky. Basically, in the anime, not the manga, after a ceasefire is signed between the Hidden Stone and the Hidden Leaf, Inoki, believing that he's lowered the guard of Konoha, sends in 1,000 Hidden Stone shinobi. However, even though Konoha should have its guard down, those 1,000 Hidden Stone shinobi are turned away by Minato, and therefore people believe that Minato showed up on this battlefield by himself and pieced up 1,000 Hidden Stone shinobi. However, that's not what happened. This concept of Minato fighting in a very important battle against Hidden Stone shinobi that led to the ultimate defeat of the Hidden Stone is not inaccurate. However, Minato was not responsible for the slaying of all 1,000 of these secret Hidden Stone shinobi. See, in actuality, what happened here is that these shinobi were sent to the front lines at the same time that Team Minato was undergoing their bridge mission that led to the death of Obito. And Minato was called unexpectedly to battle in this frontline mission because Konoha didn't think that this battle was going to happen. And therefore, the reason that Minato isn't with his team to blow up this bridge, which eventually leads to Obito's death, is because he was called to this surprise battle. However, by the time that Minato shows up to the front lines to battle it out in this surprise battle, Konoha has whittled the Hidden Stone shinobi's forces down to 50. However, there's only 4 shinobi remaining for Konoha. However, Minato shows up, saves those 4 shinobi, and defeats the 50 stone shinobi, which in combination with the destruction of the bridge that was vital to the Hidden Stone supply line in the war against Konoha, basically crippled the Hidden Stone's war effort in the Third Great Shinobi World War, causing them once and for all to back out of the war. And therefore, when Inoki says he sent 1,000 shinobi into the Land of Fire and Minato turned them away, what he is saying is that all of those 1,000 shinobi died and Minato dealt the fatal blow. So while yes, maybe Minato could have won in a battle against 1,000 shinobi, all he had to do was win in a battle against 50. Lots of talking about people involved in one-sided massacres. Coming up at number 2 on the list of myths that Naruto fans still believe in 2025, we have Danzo should have had a Rinnegan. Now this is an email that I receive, I'll say about once a month. Somebody reaches out to me and asks the question, why didn't Danzo awaken a Rinnegan? I mean, after all, he had Uchiha cells on account of the 18 Sharingan he had grafted into his body, and he had Hashirama's cells grafted onto it. And thus the combination of Hashirama's Senju cells and the Uchiha's Sharingan cells should have awoke a Rinnegan in him. Right? Wrong. See, it's not the combination of Senju and Uchiha cells that awakens a Rinnegan. Even if Danzo had a combination of Hashirama and Madara cells, if you got that combination of both of their cells after they died, that wouldn't awaken a Rinnegan in him. See, you need a combination of Indra and Ashura's chakra. And Hashirama and Madara are only the reincarnations of Ashura and Indra while they were both alive. This is why Madara was able to awaken the Rinnegan at the end of his life, because by taking some of Hashirama's cells, he was combining the chakra of Indra and Ashura to create Hagoromo. And therefore, even in the hypothetical circumstance where Hashirama were to take one of Madara's eyes after they were both reincarnated or something, that eye wouldn't turn into a Rinnegan. We've seen that Indra and Ashura kind of like haunt their current reincarnations. So the second that Hashirama or Madara dies, they stop being the reincarnation of either Indra or Ashura. Now, technically, a new set of reincarnations isn't born until both of the previous reincarnations die, which is why Naruto and Sasuke ended up being the next reincarnations, even though Hashirama died decades before either of them were born. So no, unless Danzo got the cells of Sasuke and Naruto simultaneously, he would never awaken a Rinnegan. Now I know where the idea of Danzo awakening a Rinnegan comes from. It's from the stone tablet. The stone tablet that was altered by Black Zetsu to say that the Uchiha and the Senju should combine their cells. However, the only reason that Black Zetsu did this is because it was kind of a numbers game. He understood over thousands of years in dozens of sets of reincarnations that this message that was only readable by those who had access to the Monkey Kyo Sharingan would eventually reach an Indra reincarnation, who may or may not have had access to the cells of an Asura reincarnation, awakening the Rinnegan and giving them access to the outer path, which would allow for the Eye of the Moon plan to begin. But since we're talking about Madara, we should get to our final entry, and therefore the most talked about myth in the Naruto community that is still talked about in 2025, which is that Madara's Monkey Kyo Sharingan ability allows for him to not only stop time, but also reverse it. Now, this is one of those myths that people will honestly claim has evidence. See, the entire myth that Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan ability allows for him to stop and reverse time is built off really 3 pillars. One, there's the fact that Madara in a non-canon video game shows the ability to, yes, stop and reverse time with his Mangekyo Sharingan, which seems like a pretty conclusive argument when you consider the fact that in other non-canon video games like Storm, we see things like Shisui Susanoo in both its incomplete and complete forms, and on account of the fact that Susanoo was designed by Kishimoto, a lot of people treat that as solid, concrete proof that not only did Shisui have access to the Susanoo, but that's exactly how Susanoo operated, even though he, as a non-EMS wielder, technically wouldn't have access to a full perfected Susanoo. And the same could be said for Itachi, who also in the Storm series gets a perfected Susanoo form, but unfortunately, the evidence for this idea that Madara is able to stop and reverse time goes further than just a non-canon video game, because there's also the fact that in both the anime and the manga, Madara's never shown using a Mangekyo Sharingan ability. See, while yes, the Limbo clones are a Rinnegan ability that is specific to that of Madara, and therefore may tie into the ability of his Sharingan somehow, some way, outside of Limbo clones, Madara's never shown doing anything specific to him with his Mangekyo Sharingan, and therefore there is a lot of room for speculation on what his Mangekyo Sharingan ability could be. So who am I to say that it's not stopping and reversing time, because I don't know what his Mangekyo Sharingan ability is. Now, Kishimoto himself has stated that he didn't give Madara Mangekyo Sharingan ability because if he made Madara any stronger, he didn't know how he was gonna write his defeat. And considering the fact that Madara had to be surprise feeded by Black Setsu if he was even stronger, well then people would have just been more upset. However, the third piece of evidence is possibly the most damning, because if you look up Madara Mangekyo Sharingan ability on Google, or maybe even throw in the word databook in there, a real official looking databook entry about Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan ability being the stopping and reversing of time pops up. However, this databook entry is actually from a databook created by fans for a tabletop role-playing game centered around the Naruto world, and therefore is not official, like at all. And therefore this idea that Madara is able to stop and reverse time does have physical evidence in the way of a non-canon video game, has no evidence to refute it on account of the fact that Madara never displays any other kind of MS ability, and seemingly has a databook entry to validify the claim that he does have this Mangekyo Sharingan ability. In actuality, we don't know what Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan ability is, but if it was the ability to stop and reverse time, don't you think he would have used that, oh, I don't know, before dying, or to stop himself from having a hole kicked in him by Might Guy, or being cut in half by Naruto, possibly being killed by Hashirama? There are a multitude of different times that Madara probably would have used the ability to reverse time. And thus, while it is a fun idea, it's not an accurate one. And with that, that's all of the popular myths that I can think about in the Naruto universe debunked. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What are some popular myths that you've heard about the Naruto universe that you know to be empirically false? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I believe this is Sleeping Beauty's first time being on camera, so say hello to them, Sleeping Beauty. Oh, that's the microphone. Yeah, get in there. Ah, she's a little bit shy, but you know, hey, not everyone's meant for the camera.